What's up, guys? I wanted to talk about something really quick that I've noticed is a trend in the video and photo world, which is that a lot of companies are adding the title or name Pro to their products, but a lot of them aren't necessarily what I would consider Pro products. Things like the Video Mic Pro from Rode, as well as a lot of products like cameras and drones from DJI, like this one, the Mavic 2 Pro. But as a lot of you guys know, I'm a professional drone pilot in the film industry. It's my main job and it's what I've been doing for the last 9 years straight now. But with the term Pro being thrown around so casually these days, it makes me wonder, how does something like this, the Mavic 2 Pro, compare to something like this, the FreeFly Alta 8? It's an 8-motor octocopter, super heavy lift, lifts 20 pounds. This thing flies at an all-up weight of 40 pounds. And I'll show you what we normally mount on it. This right here is what we normally hang underneath it. This is the FreeFly Movi Pro 3-axis gimbal. We normally fly the red, which is what I have mounted on here right now. We've got a short little zoom, cine zoom lens. This setup gives us a ton of flexibility. This is what we shoot movies and commercials and all that stuff on. So pro or professional obviously is turned into something that's more of a relative term, and it really depends on who you are and what you consider professional. For me, I consider our platform that allows us to work in the highest end film environments with a ton of flexibility, camera and lens wise, that's what I would consider professional. However, with the advancements that are coming into these newer lightweight drones and camera gear, the question is, how much can you get away with in a professional environment, and how professional is it really? So I figured we should just go ahead and put them side by side and see how they compare. We had a new firmware update come out for the Movi Pro. It's called Blackjack. It basically allows us to turn the motor strengths or the hold strengths on all the motors up higher so we can fly faster than we could before and maintain a better level of stabilization. So we decided to go out, track a vehicle, which ended up being my truck, and I went ahead while we were there, flew this thing at the same time, see how they compare. Now, before I get into all the specs and the differences from a tech standpoint, I just wanted to point out some of the biggest differences that I see in the two setups that we have here. The first being the difference between dual op and single op. Now, the big setup, the FreeFly Alta, as well as the Movi Pro, that's a two-man operation. It takes a separate person to operate the camera than it does to fly. So when I'm on a film set and we're doing our regular job, I'm the one in charge of placing the aircraft in the air. I'm the one that just flies the aircraft, and I'm actually a line of sight guy, so I spend most of my time just looking at the aircraft. I don't even see what we're looking at through the camera a lot of the times. And I have a separate guy that's controlling the camera on the drone. And my camera operator is using something like this. Well, he's actually using this. This is the FreeFly Movi controller. It's designed to work with the Movi, and it gives us full control of not only the gimbal and all the pan, tilt, roll settings, but it also allows us to control the lens and the camera settings themselves. So it gives us a lot of flexibility as far as what we can do with the camera and the drone, because there's separated commands. There's not as much workload on one individual. Now with something like the Mavic 2 Pro or any of the Mavic line or Phantom line for that matter, they're all going to be a single person op setup. So basically the person who's flying the aircraft is in charge of placing the aircraft in the air, as well as orienting the camera and operating the camera controls and everything. So what happens is you end up being more task saturated because you can't simultaneously look at what you're shooting and the aircraft in the air. You're going to have to be glancing back and forth. You end up spread a little bit more thin. The problem is, being that I'm just looking at this, I don't have any situational awareness. So
yeah, you don't know where you are.
No, and I can't just fly the aircraft and I can't just operate camera, so it's just too much. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the test footage we shot. Again, this was just done really quickly right at the end of the day just for fun, but let's look at some footage off first the red, and then let's look at what I got off the Mavic 2 Pro. Now bear in mind, I do have a lot of experience when it comes to flying setups like this in a dual op configuration. When it comes to single op, I'm actually not as practiced, so don't consider this as like the best footage you can get from the Mavic, because I'm sure some of you guys would be able to do even better than me. But you will see that there's some parts where my framing's just a little off, the speed of the drone's off, and it's just because you're juggling so many tasks at one time.
it.
I may have nicked the roof of my truck on that one. Just maybe. Yeah, note to self, don't get that close.
Oh my gosh. I almost hit my brakes, but...
Now, aside from just the single versus dual op, there's obviously some pretty big differences in the camera that we're flying on these. Now, the FreeFly Movi flying under the Alta gives us a payload of about, I think it's 12 or 15 pounds on the camera tray by the time we have all our video transmitters and everything set up on the gimbal. What that means is we have a lot of flexibility in being able to fly different camera and lens combos. And when you get into the higher end film industry, a lot of times, if you're shooting a movie or a commercial and it's a multi-camera shoot, the director's likely gonna wanna match camera across the board. So a lot of times we find that we're flying whatever camera production wants just to match whatever else they're shooting on the rest of the production. Now, the benefit to shooting with something like the Red camera is that you can shoot in 8K RAW, which would mean that you're getting a super high resolution image with a ton of data in there, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in post as far as what you can do, and it's going to give you just a really clean image coming off of it. And then you add that in combination with a short zoom lens like what we were flying, which allows us to frame between 18 and 35 mil. We had this one custom built. It's a super nice little lens, flares nicely. It just has a really good look to it. But the fact that we have control of not only zoom, but also focus and iris remotely through motors turning the lens in a smooth manner means that this can be used in a lot of different shooting environments that could be a little bit more difficult to do with something like a DJI product. Now, something like the Mavic 2 does have the ability to change aperture, the f-stop. However, when you're stopping between stops, they're actually going to be physical clicks. If you're going from 2.8 to 3.5, it's actually a click. It's going to make the screen go from dark to click to lighter. There's no smooth ramp. And that's where the benefit is of us having actual lens control of a manual lens in the air, is we could actually, what we call rack, from a dark area to a light area by opening the iris or opening the lens up. So it's just one of those pro features that you're not going to see on some of these other pro level drones. Now, aside from just the resolution and the camera and all that, each of these aircraft fly a little bit differently. The Mavic is one that depends a lot on the flight computer and GPS, and it's actually got a more robotic feel to it. It kind of feels a little more disconnected. Whereas the Alta, I normally fly in a more manual mode. It would actually just be a auto level with a height hold. You can turn off height hold and run full manual throttle. It always auto levels, but I very rarely am flying in a GPS mode, aside from when I'm just waiting to line up a shot. If we're just holding in our one position, I'll flick it into GPS. The difference is this guy's pretty much always in GPS. I think there's a way to turn it out into attitude mode. Again, I am not the most experienced with these. I use them from time to time on the YouTube stuff. I have used them a couple times in pro environments, but it's not my regular everyday rig. That's gonna be something like the Alta. But the difference you're gonna see in the way that they fly is that, to me, the Alta feels like it's a more organic move. Just because there's so much more mass flying through the air, you know, the things at just shy of 40 pounds, how we fly it, it just carries through in a smoother way. Whereas the Mavic, you kind of end up with this kind of jerky type feeling, and even though the image is super stable off this gimbal, it still gets a parallax shift and it feels like it's kind of a little bit skatey as it's going through the air. Other things to mention, as far as speed, I think the Mavic Pro is one of the fastest of the DJI drones. It does go really fast. However, when we were out there testing it, we had the car running the same speed both times. I think it was 40, but I had no problem keeping up on the Alta, especially with that new firmware on the Movi. It was holding rock solid. Everything looked good. When I went to do it with the Mavic, I couldn't keep up, even in sport mode. So as far as speed, I did find that the Alta is a little faster than the Mavic 2 Pro. But I do want to mention that there's a place and a time for every tool. And I actually had a shoot last week that had me flying both the Alta with the red on it and the Mavic 2 Pro. It was a kind of unique scenario because there was a place that just didn't allow for us to get in with the Alta.
But as the drone goes out, ready and rolling. And here we go, action guys. So we're railing. Full going to a blast back. Tried skedaddling, didn't it?
As you saw there, we were flying in very close proximity to a couple actors. We were also very close to the building, given that we were working off a very small balcony. It just ended up being the right tool for the job in that case. So that being said, the Mavic 2 Pro really does have a place in the professional world, because I've used it a few times on actual large film shoots that you would think they wouldn't be able to get away with something like the Mavic 2 Pro, but certain circumstances allowed us to justify it. A couple other selling points of the Mavic, you know, with being this small and light, again, it's less intrusive, it's super quiet compared to the Alta. Also, it's cheap. If you ended up in a high risk environment, I mean, I would much rather risk losing this guy versus flying the bigger setup with the cinema camera on it, just because that thing, all said and done, has almost $100,000 flying in the air. So this is a lot more digestible should you end up losing one for any reason. Now, one big question I get all the time is, do I have to have a professional setup like what I fly with Copter Kids to be able to do professional drone work, or to be able to go and fly for hire in the film industry? And the short answer is no. There's a good amount of work out there that's not going to require the highest end cinema cameras, and even some of the highest end productions out there are fine with flying a different camera on the drone. You know, we have the DJI Inspire, we end up using that on a lot of high end work, and obviously that's not matching camera and lens to the stuff that they're shooting on the ground. And also, at the end of the day, this is something I cannot emphasize enough, the tools are just that, they're tools. The important part is the operator behind it, both the cameraman and the pilot. Building those skills is the most important part in this industry. So to anyone that's looking to get into it or grow into the drone film world, I highly recommend that you spend the time to just practice and develop your skill set into something that can expand with gear if needed. But gear's just gear. Build the skill set, work on the important part, which is your operating. Now, there are a few things you can do if you're flying something like the Mavic 2 Pro and you want to make your footage look even more professional. One of the biggest things is having the proper filters on the front. Polar Pro makes a really good filter. They're available for all of DJI's products. They also make them for regular cameras as well. Optically, very nice filters. They don't mess with your color or anything like that. So if you've got one of these, go pick up a set of ND filters, and even polarizers too can be helpful in a lot of environments. All right, guys, I am gonna wrap this up here. I rambled on way too long about drones and techie stuff. I hope it didn't bother you guys. I know that's a little off base of what I'm normally doing on this channel, but yes, I am still grounded. Word on the street is that the parts for the Kit Fox should be available sometime at the end of January. So I'm hoping to get the proper approved mechanic to come up sometime early February to get that thing going. So I still got a couple more weeks, but we'll get back in the air. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Come be my wingman. See you guys on the next one. Peace.